So today's topic is all about managing our mind, right? That the thoughts that we have create our feelings, and our feelings dictate our actions or our inactions, and our actions then determine our results. So whether you're trying to create something in your life, maybe you're trying to build a better relationship with a family member, maybe you're looking to get a promotion at work, maybe you're looking to lose a couple pounds, whatever it is for you, we can look to our thoughts and our feelings to determine what actions we're going to take or not take in order to achieve those results. So our thinking really determines the quality of our life. Our awareness of that thinking, our ability to observe our thoughts, is going to be what allows us to be able to shift our thinking into a more positive, more powerful state. So why does it really matter what I'm thinking? Now, I've already told you that our thinking causes our feelings, right? But most people really haven't been taught how to, or really the importance of why we have to be paying attention to our thinking. We have over 60,000 thoughts every single day. 70 to 80% of those are negative. If you think about that for a second, that's pretty wild if you really wrap your brain around that. So 60,000 thoughts every single day, and then 70 to 80% of those are going to be negative. And they're just kind of running in the background. About 95% of everything that we do, including our thinking, is non-conscious and automatic, meaning we've created these neural pathways inside of our brain that are really shortcuts. They're trying to help us be more productive in life and to stay safe. So as we were growing, when we were really young and we started to learn certain things, we learned how to tie our shoes, we learned how to drive a car, as we were growing, we were learning lots and lots of information. And we also, at that point in time, had very flexible brains as we're taking in that information. And as we practice things with repetition, we start to build in those neural pathways so we can operate with more speed, with less of that conscious behavior. It just happens automatically. Now, the problem with that is that some of the thoughts and even some of our behaviors that we've created this neural pathway for don't necessarily serve us. So what we're experiencing in the world is really determined by the way that we're thinking. And if 95% of that has already been pre-programmed, it's going to determine the quality of our life. So the way that we know that this is true, if you think about this, right? If you think about two people who are out there in the world and they're experiencing the exact same thing. I use this example a lot because it's something that I'm going through quite a bit right now. So let's use the example of learning new technology. So you can have two people that are both learning the exact same new piece of technology. They're going through that process at the exact same time. They had the same amount of prior experience with it. And they both have two separate thoughts, very different from each other. One person might be thinking something like, this should be easier. Can anybody relate to that? When you're using a new technology and you're thinking, this should be easier, right? The other person, on the other hand, is thinking something like, I'm working on figuring this out. Same process. They're both going through the same piece of technology, but they're having very different experiences, right? So these people's experiences are determined by the quality of their thoughts. And those thoughts create very different outcomes for them. The person that's there thinking that this should be easier, anytime we have a thought that has should in it, right? Either we should be doing this or we shouldn't be doing that, or this experience should be a certain way, or it shouldn't be this way. We're having the comparison game inside of our head. And whenever we play that comparison game of what we think we should be experiencing versus what we actually are experiencing, it creates a feeling of shame inside of our body. And whenever we feel shame, we tend to withdraw, we hide. And so if this person's thinking this should be easier, the experience that they're having and creating for themselves and the outcome that they're going to create for themselves is so much harder, right? They may end up learning the technology, but it probably will take longer than the person who's thinking, I'm working on figuring this out. Just settle into that for a second. If you're thinking this should be easier versus I'm working on figuring this out, notice how both of those show up differently inside of your body and the feeling that they generate for you. One is going to be very optimistic, very growth mindset, where we know that we have to practice something with repetition. We aren't just naturally going to be great at everything. The other one's very fixed mindset, where it should be easier. It shouldn't be something that I am experiencing such trouble with. And it's those types of thought that cause us such problems in our life. So the real trouble here is that we haven't been taught how much our thoughts impact our lives, or how to observe and really manage our brains, or how what we think determines how what we feel, right? Again, one thought creates one feeling. And if we have 60,000 thoughts every single day, we have 60,000 feelings. And if 70 to 80% of those are negative, that's 45,000 thoughts that are creating 45,000 negative feelings. So the way that we're thinking really does determine the quality of our life. When we have those lower vibration feelings, things like burnout or stress or defeat or frustration, right? That's going to be reflected in the way that we're showing up and the way that we create results. However, on the flip side, if we're creating more of those high vibration feelings, confidence, joy, love, excitement, determination, our life is then going to be filled with those higher vibration results. Now, how we feel determines what we do or don't do. And that's important because the actions that we take or that we don't take are what end up getting us the results that we want to create for ourselves. So if our thinking determines the quality of our life and the results that we're creating, I want you to think about what you think about yourself. What are some of the thoughts that you have about yourself? What are some of the thoughts that you have about your relationships? What are some of the thoughts that you have about your work? What are some of the thoughts that you have about your future? These thoughts really matter. And they have weight and they have consequence. So if 95% of those thoughts that we have are just playing on autopilot and we're not thinking about what we're thinking about, it's going to be a problem. Even if it doesn't show up as a massive problem, something that is so blatantly obvious to us. But if we have those negative thoughts running in the background, it does stop us from making that forward momentum in terms of some of the things that we want to create for ourselves. Some of us haven't been taught, how to actively choose what we want to be thinking. And part of that is because, again, from an early age, we're really taught what we're supposed to think about the things that we experience. We're taught, here's how you should think about the world around you. Here's what you should think about work. Think about the fact that so many people have been pre-programmed to believe that hard work is supposed to be the way that you get success, versus really tapping in and understanding that maybe it's not harder or working harder that's going to get you success. Maybe it's working smarter. So think about some of the things that you've been taught. Could be from social conditioning, from the environments that you've grown up in. It could also come from experiences that you've had personally in the past that you're carrying forward for you. You might not even recognize that they're there. And here's the kicker. Some of those thoughts, those tiny sentences in our brain, that are just playing in the background, we wouldn't even say them out loud to ourselves sometimes. So they're just running in the background, and they're showing up, and they're contributing to what it is that we're experiencing in a very powerful way, but we haven't shined a light on them in the way that we can in order to clean up that thinking and create better results for ourselves. So I wrote down some examples here of some of these very simple thoughts that are floating around inside of our brain, and I wanted to read them to you. So here's one that I think most of these thoughts on a regular basis. So I couldn't possibly, right? I couldn't possibly take on that challenge. Or what if? That one seems so nice inside of our brain, but we tend to do, again, the comparison or worst case scenario. So what if, and then insert the worst case scenario possible. So interesting. Again, our brains they're primitive, right? They've been designed to keep us really surviving, not thriving. And so they're there to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and expend the least amount of energy as humanly possible. So our brains will always, if we aren't managing it, tend to go to the negative side and go to the worst case scenario. Unless you're continuously practicing gratitude, which is one of my favorite techniques, to wake up in the morning and really write down 3 things that you're grateful for that will help you to get into that mindset. And over time, it's actually possible for you to change your neural pathways and the structure inside of the brain and your cognitive flexibility just by practicing gratitude. So it's really quite a powerful tool. But if we aren't practicing it regularly, it's very easy for our brain to go into that survival mode and go to worst case scenario. So another one that I think is I should be more disciplined, right? Again, it seems like a lovely thought. I should be more disciplined. But again, you're inserting that should in there. And whenever we think that we should be doing something that we aren't currently doing, or I should be disciplined, when I think about it, right, it creates that feeling of shame. And whenever we feel the shame, we kind of back away. This is a waste of time. Anybody think that one before? I know that it's one of those powerful ones that'll just bubble up. Doesn't mean anything has gone wrong. Doesn't mean that what you're actually doing is a waste of time. It's just a pre-programmed thought that is living in the background that will occasionally rear its ugly head and then create that feeling. And when you believe your thought, this is the really important piece. If you believe your thought, it creates an emotion. If you don't believe your thought, and think about it this way, if I were to say to myself, Lindsay, I really don't like my blue hair, right? I don't have blue hair. So it's not a thought that I'm going to believe. Or even if we're trying to replace a negative thought with a positive thought, if we jump too far to the positive side and we don't yet believe that positive thought, it's not going to generate a positive emotion for us to then take action from. So we'll sit there and kind of be stuck in limbo because we haven't yet believed the thought. So we have to really believe it in order for it to generate a feeling that's going to help us drive the right action. Let's see, another one here. So I don't want to. This is one that my brain likes to give me on a pretty regular basis when I am being defiant. So if you think of your brain, I like to think of my brain sometimes as almost being a petulant child that is really trying to be defiant and not allow me to rule myself. And so if I'm telling myself I don't want to, let's say it's the end of the day, it's been a long day, I'm telling myself it's been a long day, I'm telling myself that I'm exhausted, and now my calendar tells me it's time to go to the gym, I might say to myself, I don't want to. And if I really believe that and feel it deeply in my body, the chance of me going to the gym without changing my thought, I can change my thought and then take action from there. But if I believe my thought of I don't want to, you can bet I'm staying put. I'll never be able to figure this out. Again, it's another one that our brains offer up. It's not actually true, but it feels true and we believe it. So again, imagine if you were to be thinking those thoughts on a daily basis, right? Again, we have 60,000 thoughts a day. So chances are somewhere throughout the day, you might be thinking one of those thoughts. How do those thoughts make you feel? If you've got one thought, it creates one emotion. How are those thoughts making you feel? And how many of those thoughts are you thinking on purpose versus how many are on autopilot? You are living your life either deliberately by choosing the way that you want to think, or you're responding on autopilot. So you're having an experience either way. What I'm offering you is really that choosing what you want to think in order to create that life on purpose is so much more fun. Okay? So much more fun. So let's go ahead and open up the chat feature. I would like for you to think about something that you've been wanting to create for yourself. Okay? So open up the chat feature and tell me something that you want to create for yourself that you haven't yet been able to create. So again, maybe it's a habit that you're working on developing, or a goal that you have. Maybe it's a relationship with a loved one that needs some repair, or maybe you want to develop a new relationship. Or maybe you're looking to define what purpose in retirement looks like. What are some of the results that you want to create for yourself? Okay, so we've got a couple here. So new job / career, love that one. I want to lose 20 pounds. Healthy relationship with new daughter-in-law. Reduce some burnout and overwhelm. Yeah, feel that. Passing my exam. Finding a new job. Getting married. Ooh, these are good. Make more money. Yeah, so think about these results that you're wanting to create for yourself, okay? Now, remember, we can choose our thoughts on purpose to create that life that we want to live. And in order to achieve those results, we need to be paying attention to the thoughts. To find the right school to go to that gives me the best opportunity to be involved athletically and academically. Okay, you know exactly how to write goals here. You got very specific. I love that for you. Yeah, the more specific that we can be, the more we have the potential to create what we want to create. If we're not super specific, our brains will get confused. It's easier for us to go all over the place. And so the more specific we can narrow it in, the more directed our thoughts become, the more potential we have to achieve our results. So step one is really becoming aware by observing our thoughts without judgment here. Okay, so in this particular instance, what we want to observe about our thoughts is, what are we thinking about what we want to create? So for those of you who have had the opportunity to really dive into some of those pre-recorded materials inside of the portal, what you will find in there are resources around how to use the model. So the model is a self-coaching tool that helps you to unpack the circumstances that you're experiencing, the thoughts about those circumstances, how your thoughts generate your feelings generate your actions, and your actions get your results. So in this particular instance, what we've just done here, what we want to do is we want to put the results that we want to create into the circumstance line. So at the top of this model. And the reason that we do that, we can actually do it in the reverse way as well, where we put the result in the result line, and then we ask ourselves questions around what actions do we need to take in order to achieve that result? And in order to take those actions, what do we need to feel? In order to feel that way, what do we need to be thinking, right? That will help you to go through and create an intentional model that will help you to get the result. But step one is all about awareness. We always want to jump to, okay, how do I get the result? We want to fast forward and skip some of the steps, but we want to first start with just creating the awareness. So for everybody, I want you to think about, by putting your result that you want to create into the circumstance line, What are you thinking about creating that result? Okay. So I want you, again, maybe open up the chat and tell me, what are you thinking about the result? One of the other one in here that just came through, making more money. So for example, with that one, what are your thoughts about making more money? What are your thoughts about passing your exam? What are your thoughts about getting that new job or that new career or building that healthy relationship? What are you thinking about creating those results? Okay. There's so much to do. I feel you on that one. So when we're thinking there's so much to do, the next step would be, how do you feel? I'm thinking about the logistics to transitioning from one job to the next. So the tasks that you need to do. So if you narrow in and get more focused there, what are some of the thoughts that you're thinking about those logistics? How are you feeling about them? What are you creating inside of your brain that is then going to have you take action or not take action? Okay. So on the money one, it looks like, okay, so I'm exhausted. I don't want to have to work harder than I already am. Okay. So if you're really thinking that thought, like I'm exhausted, and it's actually great that you put that one in there. I'm exhausted, because that is just a thought. There are times where we can most certainly feel exhausted, where the sensation inside of our body is exhaustion. But there's also times where we're just thinking the thought, I'm exhausted. And when we think the thought, I'm exhausted, it creates a feeling of more exhaustion. So we create this kind of vicious circle for ourselves. But the other part of that thought that you had is, I don't want to have to work harder than I am already, right? And so what are your thoughts? Why do you think that you have to work harder? What are you telling yourself about making this transition that's going to be quote unquote harder? And how does that make you feel when you think that it's going to be harder? Let me read some of these other ones. Tough decisions between 3 schools. However, so you've got a long paragraph here. So I'm going to use this as a teaching example for everybody, right? And it's great that you're writing in this information. So tough decisions between 3 schools. However, I am confident that whichever school I go to will benefit me academically and athletically. I am stressed over choosing the right fit school. However, I am also relieved. Okay. Those are all amazing thoughts. What you just did there is more of what we call a thought download. So you downloaded a bunch of different thoughts. What I want you to do next is I want you to pull each of those thoughts out individually and examine them one at a time. And notice, what are the feelings that you're generating from each one? Because again, our feelings generate our actions or our inactions, and those actions or inactions get our results. So if we are taking action from the negative thoughts, we may find that we have inaction, or that we take the wrong actions to get the desired results. So you pull those apart and try to focus in on one specific thought that will eventually get you the result that you're looking for. So I might look at, for example, I'm stressed over choosing the right fit schools. Okay. What does that mean to you? What is the right fit? How would you know it is the right fit? What will you create for yourself if you continue to think that you have to pick the right fit? Okay, here's another one. It's possible to have a healthy relationship. I need to focus on me, not on her possible responses to my attempts to form friendship. This is so great here. So it only takes one person to change a relationship. That's the good news. And relationships are just our thoughts about the other person. If you think about that for a second. So the quality of the relationship that you have is all determined by the way that you are thinking about that relationship. If you think that you have a good relationship, doesn't matter what's happening in the relationship, if you think you have a good relationship, it improves how you feel. And then how you feel, if you're feeling more positive, the actions that you take and the way that you show up in that relationship is going to be more aligned with how you want to show up. So just paying attention to those thoughts will be really, really powerful for you. I love that. All right. So our thoughts, the other thing I wanted to say here is really our thoughts are not a representation of who we are or our worth. So what we are thinking doesn't make us a good person or a bad person, right? These are just sentences inside of our brain. And when we aren't paying attention to them, those negative thoughts can come out and they can sabotage us or our progress even before we get started. So I want to give you an example here. I had a client that I was working with that I helped him lose 25 pounds. And prior to that journey, he had been, again, if you think about the model this way, where inside of his circumstance line is that he wanted to lose 25 pounds. The way that he was thinking about his goal previously was that nothing I do will actually matter. So he's thinking about losing the weight. And then when he's thinking about losing the weight, what's coming up is nothing I do is going to matter. That created a feeling of apathy for him. And when he felt apathetic, he didn't take action. He ended up continuing to just watch TV and not exercising and not meal prepping and a whole host of other actions that weren't serving him. So before even trying to act his way and do the things that he knew he needed to do in order to lose the weight, he had to pay attention to the fact that he was thinking and believing that nothing he did was going to matter. So what I want you to do is always put yourself into the future. Really visualize what you want to create for yourself, and then start to believe deeply in what it is that you want to create, and then become aware of those negative thoughts. Okay. Step 2 is really deciding what you want to be thinking instead. Now, I'm not going to go deep into this portion today. And the way that I'm going to describe it here is really simplified because it's so easy for us to want to jump to that next phase before creating the awareness. And if we do, we can potentially act our way towards that goal for a short period of time. But the reality is that that negative thinking could slip back in and sabotage us halfway through. So what we want to be doing is really creating that awareness first. So if you are thinking, right, we can just shift the way that we want to be thinking. At best, what ends up happening is we can get to this place of 50-50, where half of the time we have really positive thoughts and half the time we have negative thoughts. So under the best circumstance, we'll only ever get to 30,000 of our thoughts are going to be positive and 30,000 are going to be negative. And that's okay, right? That's really where we want to be, because there are certain times where we actually want to have some of those negative thoughts and those negative feelings. We want to, if something sad has happened in our life, if we lose a loved one, or with injustices that are taking place in the world, we want to have some of those passionate, powerful thoughts that are sometimes negative. That's part of the human experience. But what we're talking about here is really, again, creating that awareness for ourselves. That way, when a negative thought pops up that is not getting us the result that we want to be getting, we create the awareness and we sit with it. And we're able to observe it from that place of non-judgment. And once we observe it from that place of non-judgment, we can then decide what we want to shift it to. So the way that I do this is really by detaching myself from my brain. And you'll hear me whenever I get coached, you'll hear me actually say, my brain wants to offer me this, or my mind is trying to tell me this. So I create that separation between me and my brain, so it gives me more of that control, and I don't attach meaning or place place blame on myself for having some of these thoughts. Again, there's so many of them up there and running around that it's completely normal to go through something like learning a new piece of technology and have your brain go on autopilot and be like, this is hard, or I don't want to do this. But instead of believing it, we can sit there with that non-judgment and ask ourselves, okay, so this isn't perfect. What do we want to shift that to instead? We might want to say, it doesn't need to be perfect. Or we could go from, I'm never going to figure this out, to it will get easier in time, or I'm figuring it out, right? Or you're going to fail. You can switch it over to, if you aren't failing, you aren't putting yourself out there. Or I don't know what to do next. I always like to say, pick one thing that's going to move you forward and do that, right? So again, we have the negative thoughts, but it doesn't mean that anything has gone wrong. It's like, oh, hey, thanks for showing up today. I figured you were going to pop up and rear your ugly head, because whenever I do new things that I haven't, practiced with repetition, you show up, and that's okay. That's another thing that I like to do when I'm trying to shift things inside of my brain. I just add, and that's okay. This is hard, and that's okay. I'm tired, and that's okay. It kind of gives you that permission to have the negative thought, but do the thing anyway. It will create a more positive emotion so you can actually take action versus getting stuck. All right, so last exercise here. I want you to go back into your chat feature before we do some coaching, and I want you to share with me some of the negative thoughts that maybe you have on a daily basis. Or if it's easier, you can even think, what are some of the negative thoughts that you're thinking right now? So open up the chat, give me a couple of those that just run in the background that are pretty common for you without necessarily thinking about anything specific or any circumstance. But what are some of those negative thoughts? Okay, so here's one. I don't have time for this. Yep, I think that one quite a bit. It's not going to matter. I'm exhausted. There's so much to do. I hate my body. Today is going to be stressful. Yeah, I can't fit it all in. I should be doing something else. Yeah, these are all great. And I just want you to pause for a second and really settle into your body and ask yourself, when I'm thinking those thoughts, what is the feeling that I create for myself? And really become aware of where that feeling is showing up inside of your body. Where does it radiate? What color is it? Does it have a certain vibration to it? Sometimes it's hard for us to check in with the thoughts because there are so many of them going on, but we can feel the emotion first. And when we feel the emotion, we can then back into it and ask ourselves the question, what am I thinking that's causing me to feel this way? I will not be able to find the right school. I need to get good grades. I will never get a six-pack. So yeah, so how do you feel when you think those thoughts? What are the emotions they create? And then one step further, when you start to think, okay, what are the actions that I take from that place or not take from that place? So the experience that I would love for you to walk away from today's session is really, again, all about awareness, creating awareness of what's happening inside of our brains, creating awareness of the feelings that we're feeling on the regular, creating awareness around the habits that we have. So the two activities that I've created for you, one of them is going to allow you to track your habits for the next 2 weeks. Just notice what's happening. Don't try to change anything. You can start out with your ideal habit schedule, but don't try to force anything. Don't drive, if you want to wake up at a certain time, just pay attention to, okay, I want to wake up at 5:30. but the reality of the situation is I'm waking up at 6:30 and I'm hitting snooze. I want you to track the reality of your habits. We'll just create the awareness. And then as you are creating that awareness, we're then going to look at what do you want to be shifting that to in order to get better results. But step number one is all about awareness. Okay. The other thing that you have is your self-coaching worksheet. So that's going to allow you to pay attention to the thoughts and the feelings that you're creating and do some of those thought downloads so you can start cleaning out your brain and start directing your mind a little bit more effectively.